Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are stripping away the macro world. We're going to forget about muscles, bones, and the mechanics of movement for a moment, and to look at something that is happening right now, silently, in every single one of your cells.
It's a struggle for survival, and
Yeah.
it's one that takes place on a time scale of milliseconds.
Yeah, it's the most fundamental biological negotiation we make.
Yep.
A negotiation that just never stops. Not for a single second.
Not at all.
We are talking about the chemical tightrope walk of keeping you alive. Specifically, we're diving into gas transport and pH regulation. And I think for most people, breathing feels like a simple, almost mechanical act. You pull air in, you push it out.
Right, that's how we experience it. But physiologically, that movement of air, ventilation, it's really just the delivery truck pulling up to the warehouse.
A real business.
The real business, the complex logistics, and frankly, the danger all happens once those gases cross that threshold into the blood.
And that is our mission for this deep dive. We've brought together two absolute heavyweights of the medical literature to guide us.
The cornerstones.
Absolutely. We have Ganong's review of medical physiology,
Yeah.
and we're looking at the chapter on gas transport and pH. Ganong is just fantastic for the cellular, the molecular, the
Yeah.
real nitty-gritty details.
The mechanistic depth.
And we're pairing that with the classic Guyton textbook of medical physiology. We're drawing from their chapters on acid-base regulation and the principles of gas exchange. And Guyton is, well, it's the gold standard for understanding systems in homeostasis.
And the synthesis of those two is where the magic is. Because Ganem will tell you precisely how the molecule bends, and Guyton tells you why that bending keeps you from dying when you run for a bus.
I do want to be clear up front, though. This deep dive is our interpretation and a synthesis. We aren't just reading the textbooks to you.
No, not at all.
Think of this as a conceptual map. We really want you to go back to the source material. Read the chapters on gas transport, on acid-base balance. Use this conversation to build a scaffolding in your mind.
So that when you read the dense text, it just clicks. Reading remains essential. Our job here is to highlight the structure of the physiology so you can see the forest and the trees.
Okay, so let's set the stage with a problem. A physics problem, really. Oxygen is essential for life. We all know this. But here is the catch. Blood is mostly water.
And oxygen, to put it mildly, hates water.
Hate is a strong word, but it's chemically accurate, isn't it?
It is. Oxygen has incredibly low solubility in aqueous solutions.
And Guyton brings up Henry's law right at the start of this. Let's unpack that for a second.
Right. Henry's law is the rule book here. It simply states that the concentration of a gas in a solution is equal to its partial pressure times its solubility coefficient.
It's a formula that tells us how much gas can basically hide in the liquid.
Exactly. And for oxygen, that coefficient is just tiny.
How tiny?
It's 0.024. Now, to put that in perspective, carbon dioxide is about 20 times more soluble than oxygen.
20 times.
So if we look at a normal person, the amount of oxygen that is just dissolved in the plasma, just floating around freely, is about 0.29 milliliters per deciliter of blood.
That sounds like a rounding error.
It essentially is. And if you do the math, which Guyton loves to do, you realize that if we humans relied only on that dissolved oxygen to meet our metabolic needs, our hearts couldn't be the size of a fist,
They'd have to be.
the size of a washing machine. We would need to pump a massive, massive volume of plasma at an incredible pressure just to deliver the basics to keep our brain cells from blinking out.
We physically could not exist as complex, multicellular organisms without some kind of workaround.
We just wouldn't be here. We needed a cargo ship. We needed something that could grab oxygen out of the solution, pack it in tight, and carry it, 100 times more efficiently than water ever could.
Enter the hero of our story, hemoglobin.
Hemoglobin, the molecular solution to the solubility problem.
Now, Ganong gets really specific about the structure here, and I want to visualize this because it's not just some blob of protein. It's a machine.
It's a tetramer. That is the key word. Tetra meaning 4. It has 4 distinct subunits. We usually denote it as HB4.
And each of those subunits has a protein chain and a heme group.
Exactly. Each has a polypeptide chain, that's the globin part, and a heme moiety.
A moiety is just a fancy way of saying a functional part of a molecule, right?
Yep. And the heme is a ring structure, a porphyrin ring. And sitting dead center in that ring, like a jewel in a crown, is an atom of iron.
And this iron is the landing pad for the oxygen. But Ganong makes a very specific chemical distinction here that I think is often misunderstood. The state of that iron is critical.
It matters immensely. It has to be ferrous iron. Fed2+.
Why does the charge, the 2+, matter so much?
Because the reaction we want is oxygenation, not oxidation. Sounds like semantics, but chemically they are worlds apart.
Okay, break that down.
Oxygenation means the oxygen binds loosely and, crucially, reversibly. It hops on in the lungs, it hops off in the tissues. The iron stays ferrous, stays Fe2+ the whole time.
And oxidation.
Oxidation means an electron is lost. The iron goes from F2+ to Fe3+, which is ferric iron. If that happens, the hemoglobin transforms into something called methemoglobin.
And methemoglobin is useless.
It's worse than useless. It's a broken truck. It will not bind oxygen for transport. The blood actually turns a brownish color.
So the body has to prevent that.
It does. We have enzymes, methemoglobin reductases, that are constantly working to keep our iron in that ferrous, useful state. It's a high-maintenance system.
Okay, so we've got 4 seats on the bus, 4 subunits. Why 4? Why not just evolve one giant protein with one big iron bucket?
This brings us to what Guyton calls systems thinking. If you had one bucket, you'd have a simple linear relationship. But because we have 4 subunits bundled together, they can talk to each other.
They communicate.
They do. And this allows for a phenomenon called cooperative binding. This is the absolute secret sauce of hemoglobin.
Gannon describes this using the tense and relaxed states. I found this fascinating because it implies the molecule is physically changing shape.
Oh, it does. It breathes, in a way. Imagine the hemoglobin molecule when it's empty, when it's deoxygenated. We call this the T state, or tense state.
T for tense.
The globin units are held tightly together by salt bridges. It's rigid, it's tense.
So the empty bus has locked doors.
Effectively, yes. The affinity for oxygen in this T state is very low. The molecule actively resists taking on that first passenger.
But we know it eventually does.
Right. If the oxygen pressure is high enough, like it is in the lungs, one oxygen molecule manages to force its way in and bind to one of the heme groups. And when it does that, it disrupts those salt bridges. It physically snaps the tension.
It breaks the lock.
It triggers a conformational change. The entire molecule shifts into the R state, or relaxed state.
I love the analogy used before we started of a sticky door.
It's the perfect visualization. The first oxygen molecule has to really shoulder check the door to get it open. It takes a lot of effort.
Right.
But once they crack it, the door just swings wide open. The next 3 oxygen molecules don't have to fight at all. They can just walk right in.
And physiologically, what is the impact of that door opening?
It's a 500-fold increase in affinity. Wow. Once that first oxygen binds, the hemoglobin becomes a magnet for the next 3. It's a mechanism that ensures that if there's oxygen available in the lungs, the hemoglobin loads up completely. It doesn't want to leave the station half full.
And this mechanism, this cooperative binding, it explains the shape of the curve we all had to memorize in school, doesn't it? The oxygen-hemoglobin dissociation curve?
That's right. It's not a straight line. It's an S shape, a sigmoid curve.
And that S shape is the visual signature of cooperative binding.
Exactly. The flat bottom of the S is the T state resisting. Then the steep upward slope is the R state just rapidly filling up.
Let's really look at this map, the dissociation curve, because Guyton emphasizes that this isn't just a graph on a page. It's a description of how we stay alive in different environments.
That's right.
There are 2 main parts to the curve, the plateau at the top and the steep slope in the middle.
And they perform 2 completely different but equally important jobs. Let's start with the plateau up in the top right. This occurs when the partial pressure of oxygen, the PO2, is above 60 millimeters of mercury.
Okay. And in a healthy person at sea level, the PO2 in the lungs is what, about 104?
Correct. And at 104 millimilli Hg, hemoglobin is about 97% saturated. It's full. But look at the shape of the curve there. It's almost flat.
Which means that even if the pressure drops, the saturation doesn't really change that much.
Exactly. This is your safety factor. Let's say you travel to Denver, or maybe you have mild pneumonia, and your alveolar PO2 drops from 104 all the way down to 60.
That's a massive drop in pressure, nearly 40%.
A huge drop. You'd expect oxygen delivery to just crash.
Right.
But it doesn't. Because of that plateau, at 60 millimilli Hg, your saturation is still around 89%. You're still carrying almost a full load.
So the plateau ensures that even if the atmospheric conditions or your lung function aren't perfect, the truck still leaves the warehouse full.
That's the loading buffer. But then we have the steep slope. This is between, let's say, 10 and 40 millimeters of mercury.
And this is the delivery system.
Yes. This corresponds to the environment in your tissues. When blood reaches your muscles or your liver, the PO2 is much lower, usually around 40 millimilli Hg.
And if you look at the graph, 40 millimeter sheath sits right on that steep cliff.
Right on the edge. So if your muscle consumes just a little bit of oxygen and the local PO2 drops from 40 to, say, 35, the hemoglobin saturation plummets.
So it dumps a huge amount of oxygen for just a very small drop in pressure.
A massive dump. The hemoglobin holds on tight in the high-pressure environment of the lungs, that's the plateau, but it aggressively dumps its cargo in the low-pressure environment of the tissues. That's the steep slope.
It's just beautifully designed engineering. It maximizes loading and it maximizes unloading exactly where each one is needed.
It's perfect.
Guyton brings up a concept here called the utilization coefficient. I found this surprising because it shows just how much reserve capacity we actually have.
It is surprising. At rest, sitting here right now, we only use about 25% of the oxygen our blood is carrying.
So wait, the venous blood, the blue deoxygenated blood that's returning to the heart, is actually still 75% saturated with oxygen.
It is. It's still carrying 3/4 of its potential cargo.
That seems really inefficient. Why carry it all the way back?
It's insurance. It's a strategic reserve. It means that if you suddenly have to sprint away from a predator, or if, God forbid, your heart stops beating for a minute, there is still a huge amount of oxygen available in the venous system.
We can tap into it instantly.
Instantly. During heavy exercise, that utilization coefficient can jump from 25% all the way up to 75% or even 85%. We can tap into that reserve without needing to breathe 300% faster immediately.
So we've got the cargo, oxygen, we've got the vessel, hemoglobin, and we understand the route, the curve. But logistics is about delivering to the right place at the right time. And the body has a way to change the route.
To shift the curve. The curve is not fixed, it's dynamic. The body can shift it left or right depending on the metabolic needs of the tissues. And this is where the concept of affinity becomes the headline.
We should define that clearly. Affinity is simply how tightly the hemoglobin holds onto the oxygen.
Yes, that's it. High affinity means it loves oxygen, it grabs it, holds on, and won't let go. Low affinity means it's loose, it loads poorly, but it dumps oxygen very, very easily.
And there's a specific number physiologists use to track this, right? The P50.
The P50 value. It's the partial pressure of oxygen at which hemoglobin is 50% saturated. It's just an index. In normal blood, the P50 is about 26 or 27 millimeters of mercury.
So if the P50 goes up?
If the P50 goes up to, say, 35, it means you need more pressure to get the bus half full.
So affinity has gone down.
Exactly. So a right shift of the curve equals higher P50, which equals low affinity.
Let's talk about the famous one, the Bohr effect. This is the classic right shift.
A right shift is a shift towards let go of the oxygen. It's the dumping mechanism.
And this happens exactly where you'd want it to happen, in active tissues. Walk us through this scenario.
Okay, think about your quadriceps muscle while you're running. That tissue is metabolically screaming. It's doing 3 things physically. First, it's getting hot. Temperature is rising.
Right.
Second, it's burning fuel, so it's producing a ton of CO2. And third, it's producing metabolic acids like lactic acid. So the pH is dropping. It's becoming more acidic.
And those are the 3 triggers for the Bohr effect.
Those are the big 3.
Yeah.
Increased temperature, increased CO2, and decreased pH or acidosis.
I want to understand the mechanism, though. How does an acid, a tiny hydrogen ion, actually make a massive protein like hemoglobin let go of its oxygen?
It's a direct attack on the structure. Hydrogen ions, the H+, they bind to the protein part of the hemoglobin, the globin chains, and crucially, they bind much better to deoxyhemoglobin than they do to oxyhemoglobin.
So they prefer the empty bus.
They do. And by binding, they form new salt bridges that stabilize that T state, the tense, rigid state we talked about earlier.
So they physically force the molecule into the shape that cannot hold oxygen well.
That's a great way to put it. The presence of acid literally squeezes the oxygen out of the hemoglobin molecule.
That is such an elegant feedback loop. The more active the tissue is, the more acid it makes, which forces more oxygen to be dumped right at that specific location.
It's perfect. And the converse is true in the lungs. In the lungs, the temperature is slightly lower, you're blowing off CO2, so the pH is higher, more alkaline. All of that shifts the curve to the left.
The high affinity.
High affinity. So the lungs are optimized to grab oxygen and the tissues are optimized to dump it. It's a beautiful dynamic system.
There's another factor that shifts the curve, something called 2-O-3-3-DPG. Now this one feels a bit more complex.
2-phenol-3-diphosphoglycerate.
Yeah, this is a fascinating molecule. It's a byproduct of glycolysis, specifically the Embden-Meyerhof pathway in the red blood cell.
And red blood cells don't have mitochondria, right? So they have to rely entirely on glycolysis for all their energy. Correct. So they're constantly producing this 2-3-DPG as they metabolize glucose. Now, 2-3-DPG is a highly charged anion. It binds to the beta chains of deoxyhemoglobin.
So just like the acid protons.
Just like them, it stabilizes the T state. It sort of wedges itself in there and keeps the hemoglobin locked in the release mode.
So high DPG causes a right shift.
Yes. But unlike the Bohr effect, which happens in seconds due to local acid changes, TPG changes are a slower adaptation. They happen over hours or days.
Okay, let's apply this. Clinical thought experiment.
Right.
What happens at high altitude?
Right. You fly to the Andes, the air is thin, your alveolar PO2 drops, you're hypoxic, your red blood cells respond to this chronic stress by ramping up glycolysis and making more 2-3-DPG.
So within a day or two, your DPG levels rise.
Which shifts your curve to the right.
Now, why is that good? If you're hypoxic, don't you want to grab more oxygen in the lungs? A right shift makes that harder.
You would think so. It's a great question. A right shift does actually make it slightly harder to pick up oxygen in the lungs. But the benefit you get from being able to unload that precious oxygen to your starving tissues far outweighs the small penalty in the lungs.
So it's a trade-off. It prioritizes delivery over loading.
Exactly. It's a crucial adaptation.
Now, Ganna mentions fetal hemoglobin, HbF, in this context. This is amazing.
Oh, this is one of the coolest evolutionary tricks. A fetus is effectively a parasite on the mother for oxygen. It has to pull oxygen out of the mother's blood across the placenta.
And if the fetus had the same hemoglobin as the mother, it would just be a 50-50 tug of war.
And nobody would win. The fetus would be hypoxic. So fetal hemoglobin is structural different. Instead of having 2 beta chains like adult hemoglobin, it has 2 gamma chains.
And gamma chains behave differently with DPG.
Completely differently. Gamma chains do not bind 2-argon-3-DPG very well at all.
So if they can't bind the molecule that forces them to let go, they must default to hold on tight.
Precisely. They stay in the high-affinity R state much more easily. This shifts the entire fetal curve to the left of the mother's curve. The fetus has a stronger magnet for oxygen than the mother does.
So when maternal blood meets fetal blood at the placenta, the oxygen just naturally flows downhill from mom's hemoglobin to the baby's.
It steals it, essentially. A perfect system.
Now, there's a darker side to this DPG story involving blood banking that Guyton warns about.
This is a vital clinical pearl. When we donate blood and it gets stored in a blood bank, it's refrigerated. The red blood cells, they slow down. They stop doing glycolysis.
So they stop making 2-3-DPG.
And the DPG that's already in there just breaks down over time. So stored blood, especially blood that's been sitting for a few weeks, has almost zero 2-3-DPG.
Which means it acts like fetal blood.
It develops a massive left shift. It has an incredibly high affinity for oxygen.
So if I'm an ER doc and I transfuse 4 units of this old blood into a trauma patient who is bleeding out, what happens?
You restore their volume, you restore their blood pressure, the red blood cells are circulating, but they won't let go of the oxygen, they just hoard it.
So the tissues could still be starving for oxygen even though the patient is technically full of blood.
That's the danger. Now, once the blood is in the body, it warms up and starts making DPG again, but it can take 6 to 24 hours to restore normal levels. In a critical trauma patient, that delay matters a lot.
Okay, before we leave oxygen transport entirely, we have to talk about the outliers. The molecules that break the rules. First, myoglobin.
Myoglobin is the solo artist. It's found in muscle cells. Unlike hemoglobin, it has only one subunit. It's a monomer.
So no cooperative binding, no sticky door effect.
None whatsoever, because there's no team to cooperate with. And because of that, its dissociation curve isn't S-shaped. It's a rectangular hyperbola. It just shoots straight up and stays up.
It's a hoarder.
A total hoarder. It grabs oxygen instantly and refuses to let go until the PO2 is extremely low, like in the single digits. It's designed as a local emergency storage tank inside the muscle, only to be used when blood flow is cut off during a strong contraction. It's the emergency pantry.
And then we have the true villain of gas transport, carbon monoxide, CO.
Carbon monoxide is terrifying because it hacks the system so perfectly. To the hemoglobin molecule, CO looks a lot like oxygen. It binds to the exact same spot on the iron atom.
But it binds much, much tighter.
Incredibly tighter, about 210 to 250 times higher affinity than oxygen.
There's a bully.
It's a bully that never leaves.
Yeah.
If there's even a tiny amount of CO in the air, like a partial pressure of 0.6 millimolar mLHG, it can outcompete oxygen effortlessly. But that's only half the problem.
There's more.
If it just took up the seats, that would be bad enough, like a severe anemia. But CO causes what we call a double whammy.
What's the second hit?
The second hit is conformational. When CO binds to just one of the 4 seats on the hemoglobin molecule, it locks the other 3 subunits into the high-affinity R state.
Wait, so the seats that actually have oxygen in them?
They can't let go. The CO molecule shifts the entire curve radically to the left. So not only do you have less oxygen on board because CO took the spots, but the oxygen you do have is held hostage. It cannot unload at the tissues.
And the patient doesn't look blue. They're not cyanotic.
No, and this is the really insidious part. Blue, or cyanosis, is the color of deoxyhemoglobin, empty hemoglobin, but cohemoglobin is a bright cherry red color. It looks almost identical to oxygenated blood.
So the patient looks pink, healthy, flushed.
While their brain is suffocating, it's why you can't rely on a standard pulse oximeter for CO poisoning. The little red light on the machine just sees saturated hemoglobin and gives you a reading of 99% or 100%.
It doesn't know it's saturated with poison, not oxygen.
It has no idea. You need a specific blood gas analysis, a co-oximeter, to actually find it.
That is absolutely chilling. Okay, let's shift gears. We've delivered the fuel, oxygen. Now we have to take out the trash, carbon dioxide transport.
And this is where the story really pivots from just gas transport to acid-base balance. Because CO2 is not just waste. That is a huge misconception. CO2 is the currency of pH.
There are 3 ways CO2 travels in the blood. Let's run through them quickly.
First, a small amount is dissolved.
Sure.
Just like oxygen, CO2 dissolves in plasma. But because it's more soluble, this accounts for about 7% of transport. Not insignificant, but it's not the main show.
Okay, second.
Second, carbamino compounds. CO2 can bind directly to proteins. It binds to the globin part of hemoglobin again, distinct from the iron where oxygen binds. This accounts for about 23%.
And the big one, the main event.
Bicarbonate, 70%. The vast majority of all CO2 is transported as a chemically modified form, bicarbonate or HCO3-. This is the chemical shape-shifting trick.
Walk us through this reaction. This is arguably the central equation of all of physiology.
It starts simply enough. CO2 plus H2O, carbon dioxide plus water.
Ingredients that are absolutely everywhere in the body.
They combine to form carbonic acid, H2CO3. Now, in the plasma, this reaction is incredibly slow. It would take forever. But inside the red blood cell, there is an enzyme called carbonic anhydrase.
The catalyst.
This enzyme is an absolute beast. It accelerates this reaction 5,000-fold. It's explosive. The moment CO2 diffuses into the RBC, boom, it is instantly converted to carbonic acid.
And carbonic acid is unstable.
Very. It immediately dissociates. It splits apart into a hydrogen ion, H+, and a bicarbonate ion, HCO3-.
So now we have an acid, the H+, and a base, the bicarbonate, trapped inside the cell.
And the cell has a problem. If that bicarbonate builds up inside, the whole reaction will grind to a halt. So the cell has a transporter that pumps the bicarbonate out into the plasma.
And this is crucial, right? Because that bicarbonate in the plasma becomes the blood's primary buffer against acid.
It's the most important buffer, yes. But if you move a negative ion, bicarbonate, out of the fight.
You create an electrical imbalance. The inside of the cell becomes too positive.
So to maintain electrical neutrality, a different negative ion, a chloride ion, Kl-, shifts in from the plasma to take its place.
This is the chloride shift.
Also known as the hamburger phenomenon for historical reasons.
Does this actually change the physical cell? Like, can you see a difference?
You can. Chloride pulls water with it by osmosis. So red blood cells in your venous blood, after they picked up CO2, are actually slightly swollen and larger than the red blood cells in your arteries.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Now, we mentioned the Bohr effect earlier, how acid and CO2 help dump oxygen. Does it work the other way around?
It does, and that is the Haldane effect. The Bohr effect is how CO2 affects O2 transport. The Haldane effect is how O2 affects CO2 transport.
How does that work?
Okay, imagine the blood arriving back at the lungs. It's loaded with CO2, mostly as bicarbonate. Suddenly, oxygen floods in and binds to the hemoglobin.
The hemoglobin becomes oxyhemoglobin.
And oxyhemoglobin is a stronger acid than deoxyhemoglobin. Chemically, it's just a more acidic molecule. Because it's more acidic, it releases the hydrogen ions it was carrying.
And those freed up hydrogen ions, they go and hunt down the bicarbonate.
They do. The H+ binds to bicarbonate, which drives the reaction backwards. It turns it back into carbonic acid, which the carbonic anhydrase then converts back into CO2 and water. And whoosh, you breathe the CO2 out.
So it's a perfect cycle. The Bohr effect says, here's some acid, give me your oxygen. And the Haldane effect says, here's some oxygen, get this CO2 out of here.
It's efficiency at its absolute finest. By linking these two transport systems, the body essentially doubles the efficiency of both.
This brings us to the most volatile part of our discussion, pH regulation, the acid-base tightrope.
This is where physiology becomes a matter of incredibly strict constraints. The normal pH of your arterial blood is 7.4. The safe range is tiny, 7.35 to 7.45.
Why so precise? Why can't we tolerate a pH of 7.2 or 7.6?
Enzymes. Every single chemical reaction in your body relies on enzymes, which are proteins, and proteins rely on their specific 3D shape to function.
And pH messes with the shape.
pH affects the electrical charges on the amino acids, which dictates their shape. If the pH drops to 6.9 or rises to 7.8 for even a few minutes, your enzymes unravel. They stop working, metabolic pathways shut down, you die.
And the challenge is that our own metabolism is constantly trying to acidify us.
We are acid factories. We produce about 80 milliequivalents of non-volatile acid like sulfuric and phosphoric acid every day just from eating protein. And on top of that, we produce massive amounts of volatile acid, which is CO2.
So how do we not burn up from the inside? Guyton outlines 3 lines of defense.
Line 1. Chemical buffers. These act in seconds. They are the first responders on the scene.
The respiratory system. This acts in minutes. The ventilation response.
The renal system. The kidneys. This takes hours to days. This is the heavy artillery.
Okay, let's start with line 1, the buffers. Specifically, the bicarbonate buffer system.
This one is on the surface chemically paradoxical. It consists of a weak acid, carbonic acid, and its salt, sodium bicarbonate. Now, any chemist will tell you that a buffer works best when the pH of the solution matches its pK value.
The pK is the chemical balance point.
Right, and the pK of the bicarbonate system is 6.1.
But our body operates at a pH of 7.4. That's a huge gap. Chemically, that should be a terrible buffer at body pH.
In a closed beaker, it would be garbage, but in the body, it is the most powerful extracellular buffer.
Yeah.
And the reason is because it is an open system.
Meaning we can control the ingredients.
Exactly. In a beaker, the total amount of acid and base is fixed. In the body, we can control the CO2, the acid part of the equation. With our lungs, we can blow it off or we can hold on to it.
And the kidneys control the other side.
The kidneys control the bicarbonate, the base part. We can pee it out or we can make new stuff. Because we can independently manipulate the numerator and the denominator of the Henderson-Hasselbalch equation, we can force the system to work perfectly at pH 7.4.
We rig the game.
We absolutely rig the game.
What about proteins? Hemoglobin isn't just a transport truck. You said it's a buffer too, right?
It's a fantastic buffer. It's full of histidine residues, which are amino acids that are great at grabbing and releasing hydrogen ions. And remember how we said deoxyhemoglobin is a weaker acid?
Yes.
Well, a weaker acid is a better base. That means when hemoglobin dumps its oxygen in the tissues, it transforms into a better sponge for hydrogen ions.
So right at the moment the tissue's making acid, because it's working hard, the hemoglobin transforms into the perfect sponge to soak that acid up.
Precisely. It hides the acid so the local pH doesn't crash. It effectively smuggles the acid back to the lungs to be handled there.
Okay, that brings us to defense line 2, respiratory regulation.
This is a classic negative feedback controller. It's simple but incredibly powerful. If the hydrogen ion concentration rises, so acidosis, or if the CO2 level rises, the respiratory center in the brainstem gets stimulated.
You just breathe faster and deeper.
Your alveolar ventilation increases. You blow off CO2. And since CO2 is an acid in disguise, losing it raises your blood pH back toward normal.
How powerful is this compared to the chemical buffers?
Guyton estimates it's about 1 to 2 times more powerful than all the chemical buffers combined. But he also notes a critical limitation. It is only about 50 to 75% efficient.
Why not 100%? Why can't I just breathe until my pH is perfectly back to 7.4?
Because the drive to breathe is balanced. If you corrected the pH all the way back to 7.4, you would remove the very stimulus that is making you breathe harder in the first place. Your breathing would slow down and the acid would just climb back up.
So it stabilizes the problem, but it can't completely fix it.
It can't. It buys time.
Buying time for the ultimate fixer. Defense line 3, the kidneys.
The renal system. It is slow, it takes hours or days to really ramp up, but its correction is absolute. The lungs can handle the volatile acid, CO2, but they can't touch the non-volatile stuff like sulfuric or phosphoric acid. The kidneys can. They don't just hide the acid, they eliminate it from the body for good.
Guyton breaks this down into 3 fundamental mechanisms, and I think we need to understand each one because this is where the real cleaning happens.
Okay, mechanism 1 is reabsorption of filtered bicarbonate.
It's conservation.
Pure conservation. You filter a huge amount of bicarbonate every day, about 4,320 milliequivalents. If you peed that out, you'd lose your primary buffer and you'd develop a severe acidosis within hours.
So you have to catch all of it.
You have to catch every last bit. But here's the trick. Bicarbonate cannot cross the kidney cell membrane to be reabsorbed directly. It's too big and it's charged.
So how do you get it back into the blood?
You have to perform a chemical sleight of hand. The kidney cell secretes a hydrogen ion, an H+, into the urine. That H+ meets the filtered bicarbonate in the tubule. They combine.
To form carbonic acid, then CO2.
Exactly. And CO2 can cross the membrane. It's a gas. It diffuses back into the kidney cell. Once inside, the carbonic anhydrase converts it back into bicarbonate, and that bicarbonate is then pumped into the blood.
So you spend a proton to save a bicarb.
That's the transaction. But notice there's no net change in the acid-base status of the body here. You're just preventing loss. You aren't fixing an acidosis. You're just treading water.
So to actually fix a problem, we need mechanism 2 and 3. Mechanism 2 is secretion of H+ BART.
Acidification of the urine. We have active pumps, like an H+AT paste, that literally throw hydrogen ions from the blood into the urine. This clears acid from the body, but there's a limit.
A pH limit.
pH limit. The urine can only get so acidic, about a pH of 4.5. If it gets lower than that, the gradient becomes too steep and the pumps just stop working.
So if I have a massive acid load, say from diabetic ketoacidosis, and I hit pH 4.5 in my urine, am I stuck?
That is where mechanism 3 saves you. This is the game changer. Generation of new doubly bicarbonate.
How does that work?
When you have secreted enough protons to reabsorb all the filtered bicarb and you've acidified the urine down to its limit, you still have protons left over in the blood that you need to get rid of. These protons need a partner in the urine to buffer them so the pH doesn't drop any further.
A buffer in the urine itself?
Yes. They pair up with phosphate buffers or, much more importantly, with ammonia, NH3.
Ammonia, where does that come from?
The kidney cells metabolize the amino acid glutamine, and in the process they produce ammonium, NH4+. When a hydrogen ion is excreted, paired with ammonium, for everyone that leaves, the kidney creates a brand new bicarbonate ion and adds it to the blood.
So for every unit of acid you throw out wrapped in ammonia, you gain a unit of base in the blood.
Exactly. This actually corrects the acidosis. It doesn't just buffer it, it reverses it. This is the dominant mechanism the body uses to fight chronic acidosis.
Okay, let's pull this all together. Let's run through some integrated physiological scenarios to see how these systems layer on top of each other.
Let's do it.
Scenario A. You get on a plane and land in the Andes. High altitude.
Okay. Immediate effect. Hypoxia, low oxygen pressure. Your peripheral chemoreceptors, your oxygen sensors, they scream.
So you start breathing faster.
Right.
Hyperventilation.
Right. And you blow off CO2. But remember, CO2 is an acid. If you lose acid, you become alkaline. You develop a respiratory alkalosis.
Now, how does that alkalosis affect the oxygen curve?
Alkalosis causes a left shift. High affinity.
Yeah.
Your hemoglobin grabs oxygen beautifully in the lungs, but it refuses to let go in the tissues. This actually makes the tissue hypoxia worse.
It's a double bind. So what's the fix? How does the body compensate?
You have to wait a few days. Two things happen. First, your red blood cells start making more 2-value-3-DPG. That causes a right shift to counteract the pH effect and improve oxygen unloading.
And the kidneys?
The kidneys see the alkalosis and say, we have too much base. They stop reabsorbing all the bicarbonate. You start to pee out bicarbonate. This lowers your blood pH back toward normal, correcting the alkalosis over 2 to 3 days.
Okay, scenario B, diabetic ketoacidosis or DKA.
Here, you have a primary metabolic problem. Your body isn't using glucose, so it's burning fat like crazy. It produces ketones, which are strong fixed acids. Your bicarbonate levels in the blood just crash because they're being used up buffering all this new acid.
So you're in a severe metabolic acidosis.
The respiratory center in your brain senses that low pH and it screams, ventilate. You see this deep, rapid, almost gasping breathing. Clinically, it's called Kussmaul breathing.
The body's trying to blow off CO2 to compensate for the metabolic acid.
Exactly. The lungs are trying to fix a kidney and metabolic problem. And meanwhile, the kidneys are working overtime, ramping up ammonia production to excrete acid and generate new bicarbonate to refill the tank.
Last one. Scenario C, exercise, the perfect storm. You're running a marathon.
This is where everything works in perfect concert. Your muscles are consuming O2, dropping the local PO2, they're producing CO2, they're producing lactic acid. They are getting hot.
So locally, at the muscle.
Yeah.
High temperature, high CO2, and low pH.
It's a massive Bohr effect. The curve shifts way to the right. Hemoglobin just vomits oxygen into the muscle. The utilization coefficient jumps from 25% at rest to 85% or more.
And structurally, what's happening to the blood vessels?
Guyton points out that capillaries that were closed and collapsed at rest now pop open. This is called recruitment. It massively increases the surface area for diffusion, so the gas can move from the blood to the muscle cell even faster.
It's a beautifully orchestrated panic.
It is. It's a system pushed to its absolute limit and working perfectly.
So let's wrap this up. We started this whole conversation with the idea of a struggle for survival at the millisecond level.
We did. And we've traced oxygen entering via simple pressure gradients, writing this incredibly complex cooperative protein called hemoglobin, and then being intelligently dumped by the byproducts of metabolism, acidity, and heat.
And we saw CO2 riding back, disguised as bicarbonate, effectively hiding in plain sight in the plasma.
And finally, we saw the kidneys acting as the ultimate slow but methodical street sweepers, cleaning up the mess and creating new buffer to keep the whole system running for another day.
It really changes how you look at a simple blood test, doesn't it? When you see pH 7.4 on a lab report.
It's not just a number, it's a victory, a hard-won victory.
Here's a final thought for you to take away from this. We tend to think of balance, of homeostasis as a state of rest. A calm lake.
But physiologically, that balance, that pH of 7.4, is a violent, high-energy struggle. It involves enzymes working at incredible speeds, gas diffusion, and ion pumps working against the clock, burning ATP, constantly shifting molecules.
Life exists only because we have learned to trap a waste gas, CO2, and use it as an acid to regulate our own internal chemistry. We aren't just breathing, we are chemically engineering our own existence. Breath by breath.
We are walking the tightrope, and the chemistry is the only thing keeping us from falling.
If you want to see the math of all this visualized, please check out the diagrams in Ganong's chapter on gas transport and Guyton's on acid base, specifically the nomograms. They are beautiful summaries of everything we've talked about. Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive.
See you next time.